And so you may have noticed my beautiful artistic and graphic skills. I've tried to put an elevator in the background just to reinforce that this is an elevator pitch in case anybody's not sure. So I wanted to start off by saying, and Susan has really emphasized this quite a lot in hers, which is around timing and around obviously reading things like the guidelines. So just to say, I presented in front of different committees, different funders with a different sort of feeling for what they want. And some will give you 5 minutes, some will give you 2 minutes, some will give you 3 minutes. Others will say, oh no, you need to have slides prepared and you need to speak to the slides, or you need to submit, you know, a document in advance. So again, just be really, really, really clear about what it is that you're actually permitted to do. So assuming you have, say, no more than about 2 minutes, what I would say is always introduce yourself and your idea in a few words. So for example, I'm Joan Lalor, I'm a midwife, and my particular interest is in birth-related trauma. Something like that, and then at least they know, well, where might this person be going from here? Then, as Susan said already, look at the problem. Again, this is a little bit like, I think comes back to a little bit what Lara said, that came up in their group around the impact. So is the impact very small and very local, or is it very broad and very wide? Is it across countries? Is it across cultures? And if you're making the case that the problem is very significant or very widespread, then you need to come back and focus a little bit, like Susan said, is on what aspect of the problem very specifically are you going to focus on and attempt to make a contribution to. So then I think what you need to be very clear about is, and Susan referred to this in a way as the excellence, what sets you apart from others? So why are you brilliant? Why are you amazing? Why is this idea maybe unique? Are you using a research design in a very unique or unusual or innovative way? Why do you think you're going to get results by taking this approach that maybe a traditional approach won't get? And are you going to get your results faster? Are you going to get them from a bigger sample? What is it that sets you apart from others who are working in this area in terms of your approach, your expertise, the team that are around you? And again, and I think you've probably come up with this in your groups, so repeat the strong point of your idea. And if you think, you know, a little bit like the European grants where you could potentially be in a 3-stage process that you're potentially going to be called back again, you need to leave a sort of like a hook so that they've more to ask you and want you to come back. But if this is a one-hit wonder and you have 2 minutes, then you need to be very clear that you've given them the bones of what they need and all they're doing is potentially seeking clarification. So that said, the elevator pitch for me really is, and this is so difficult, it's a concise statement of either your research interests, if, for example, you're going for a job and you're talking about your program of research, and it's almost like an interview, or if you're looking for funding or you're trying to present your findings and make a point to a particular policymaker, then it's going to be about your specific project and your findings. It should give a memorable and positive impression of your work and obviously of you. So is it the case that you turn up and a little bit like you're so nervous you can't speak or you don't finish what you plan to say? There are no teeth in your smiles, there is no eye contact, whatever it might be, try really hard to show that you are the one who's being remembered for a really good reason. And if, for example, the document, say it's a grant application, scores the same as somebody else, you now have a chance to really give that extra bit about you and why the funder might actually be interested in you. Always remember your elevator pitch opens the door to a deeper discussion or more clarification. And again, Susan said this, and it's just so important, is to know your audience and try and popularize your topic. One of the challenges we face in Ireland is we almost never know who the reviewers are. We don't know what discipline they're from. We don't know what their names are in advance because it's considered that we might approach them and try and lobby. And so they make all sorts of rules about keeping them at a distance from us. But I think what you can be very clear about is if you're applying for a research grant, they are going to be people who understand research funding, project management, essentially how a project runs, whether it's realistic, as Susan said, and viable within the time. But you need to turn it into something that's important to them. So for example, if we were talking about birth-related trauma, we might say, well, everybody knows what trauma is. You know, it's a really negative event that affects you, that causes you stress. Now, did you ever realize that of all the families you know and all the members in your family, somebody in your family can go on to have a traumatic experience just related to birth? Do you see what I mean? Turn it into something that everybody in the room, just as human beings in the room, can understand. And I was talking to Sandra and Susan earlier about this, the structure and the practice. And I was saying, please, please do as I say and not as I do. If I was going for a grant though, and I knew that I only had 2 minutes or whatever, and it's serious competition, and being a very competitive person, I am going to practice because I would not like somebody else to get the grant other than me. And so I have to be honest and say that the investment that you put in is worth it. Even if it's preparing a document, do it well and truly in advance and go over and over and over it and get feedback. And put on your hippopotamus skin when you're getting the feedback in the beginning. Try not to think, oh, that feedback doesn't apply to me. Maybe take time to process it, have a think about it, and there may be something very useful in it. So I would structure things around the number of components. So if I'm doing an elevator pitch and I say there's 4 components, then I will speak of 4 aspects in each component. If you're telling me I have a shorter amount of time, I might present 3 components, 3 aspects in each of them, and then come to the end and say, now the 3 things I told you about are. But in this one, I just want to say I'm going to focus on 4 things, which is the problem, the solution, the benefit, and the action. So in the problem, I think focus on very quickly, a little bit like in your introduction. Hi, I'm Joan Lalor. I am working with, we are working on. So what is it that you are doing? Why are you doing it? So why is it important to you? And ultimately, how does it fit into the expertise that the team have or the university have or the area that you're working in or your own professional discipline? What problem will research in this area solve? And again, while you're talking about it being an important problem that's transferable across populations or institutions or countries, you still need to be very clear on where your contribution is, because none of us can solve world hunger or climate change or whatever in one go. But a little bit like the Earthshot Prize the other night, somebody has a good idea about some aspect that could be very innovative and novel. And again, what part of the problem is your research focused on? So even if the sub area is big, where will you make your contribution? So if we move on to the second of the 4, which is the solution. So this is the how bit. So this is about your kind of your methodology a little bit in a way, and showing that you can do it and do it in the time frame, that your research questions match your methodology and so forth. So how are you going to solve it? What is your approach? And again, here, if you're taking an innovative methodological approach, be very clear that you emphasize that you, if you're working with a team, a little bit like Susan said earlier, you know, and there's very particular excellence, you know, in terms of work that's previously done that you're building on, talk about it in here. If you're taking a straightforward approach to methodology, then move on and focus on the other areas. So how soon do you expect to see results, and what do you need to have to achieve that? And remember, If you're looking for funding, they may ask you to justify your budget. So why do you need these machines? Why do you need these consumables, whether they're blood bottles or saliva or lab tests? Why do you need a research assistant? Why do you need to pay funding to a certain lab for certain reasons? So again, the what do you need may be linked with how you justify your budget. So number 3 of 4, which is the benefit. The top one is particularly important if you're trying to present your findings. But remember, if you're seeking funding, what you are about to say is, well, this is the area in which I think I'll make my breakthrough. But if you're already presenting your findings, you're being very clear about the breakthrough that you've made. Again, who or what will benefit? And here is a little bit like what Lara was talking about earlier in the group, you know, the potential for impact beyond the local or national area. Where will your benefits lead? And this is where you really can sort of think big, because you're not responsible for where they lead. You're sort of setting out the potential of where they could go, and then how to get maximum benefit. So the 4th one, our final one, which is action. And I almost think this should be call to action, if that makes any sense. So what is it you want the audience to do? Are you looking for them to fund you? Are you looking for them to give you a job? Are you looking for them to implement your research? Are you looking for them to extend funding, you know, an additional phase? You know, has something come up in an earlier study that you think, oh, we could develop another arm of this? If you're looking for funding, again, you need to justify why is it worth their while. You may very well be trying to get someone to implement your findings. I know at the end of this action, we'll be desperately trying to get access to not just clinicians, but to policymakers to see, can we get any kind of a strategic decision or position about how birth trauma should be dealt with across the multiple maternity care provisions that there are across Europe. And really what you're encouraging them to do is to ask questions about your work. So you kind of want to tantalize them a little bit about how exciting your work actually is and that they really want to find out more. So just to say, I think I've used my 10 minutes, and I just wanted to just say to you now that what you might want to do is to take a screenshot of this particular slide, because you're going to move into, I think, that first exercise or activity, which is where you're going to try to have a research pitch. And just to remember that about 150 words, which is half an abstract, is the equivalent of a minute. And the reason I'm asking you to screenshot this is because there are prompts as to what you should think about when you're having a look at that pitch. Sandra, can I just ask that when you're thinking about the feedback, that you think about, you know, how, when somebody has heard you, can they retell the points that you thought that you were making? You know, what have they understood? Again, what did they bring up that was really important, or what was missing? And the interesting parts, because again, if you're trying to make that human or emotional connection, what bits did they really latch onto that made sense to them just from the human connection point of view, and any suggestions that they have for you?